After the Second World War, Germany attempted to bury its past. Public discussion about the atrocities committed by Hitler's Nazi regime were carefully avoided. In the 1980s, 50 years after the war ended, German cities invited back Jewish citizens who had fled or were expelled from the country in the 1930s. The visits were one way Germany began honestly reckoning with its past. My father, Alfred Altman, was born in 1921 in Düsseldorf, Germany. Johanna, my father's mother, was a seamstress. She owned a successful dress shop in Düsseldorf's Königsallee fashion district. My father, an only child, lived above the shop with his parents. He escaped from Germany in 1939 to England. He never saw his beloved parents, David and Johanna, again. My dad made his first trip back to Germany in 45 years. A highlight of his trip was a visit to his primary public school, where he had been asked to speak. He took them through what had been a typical day for him when he would have been their age. Reconnecting with memories of his youth began his journey of healing from his painful past. A few years after my father's initial visit to Germany, the organizers of the event called him with urgency. They told my father about an elderly German woman who had come running in calling out, "Altmans, the Altman family, are they here?" She was waving in her hand an article about the return of Jews to Düsseldorf. She appeared desperate to find my father and had been searching for him for 50 years. Her name was Marta, and she said she had worked for my father's mother. She was not someone he had been close to, but he remembered her. August 1990, my brother Dave and I arrived in Düsseldorf, Germany to meet Marta. The door opened, and we saw an elderly woman sitting in a chair. It was one small room with a kitchenette, sofa, a table, and an alcove for her bed. She took one look at me, her eyes filled with tears. Johanna, for I looked exactly like my grandmother. Her story begins on the night of November 9th, 1938, the infamous night known today as Kristallnacht. She had been working in the house with my grandmother when my father and his father heard their beloved synagogue was burning. The two immediately ran out to the street to see what was happening. Soon after the men left the house, the brown shirts arrived. Marta described the horror and destruction they committed. These two women, seamstress and assistant, Jew and Gentile, lived and survived terror together. The synagogue had burned to the ground that night, but the men's absence from the apartment at that time had probably spared them from deportation. Once the soldiers were gone, Marta summoned her husband to help her gather from the street whatever was salvageable of their possessions. She and her husband carried mattresses and furniture to their second-floor apartment. It was astounding to hear how she matter-of-factly undertook these heroic steps at great personal risk to herself and her husband. Once a week, she would meet in a park. My grandfather would arrive with an empty suitcase, and Marta a suitcase filled with whatever food she could scrounge from her job at a farm. They would sit on a park bench and transfer the suitcases. Where the key class was would be notes usually marking the place they would meet next. Marta stood up from her chair and began to go to nooks and crannies in her tiny apartment, bringing out items. Look here, she pointed. See that on the painting? It is the mark from the Nazi's heel where he stomped on it. I understood that this woman had put herself and her family at risk, not once, but many, many times for my family. I tried to find the words of my gratitude. She looked at me straight in the eye and said, I did it because it was the right thing to do, and my daughter would do the same today. Marta did not have a life of riches, but her heart and actions were a treasure chest. She was the epitome of a righteous Gentile. She is a reminder to us that even in the darkest times, there are those who resist evil. She is a role model to me and to all of us who seek to build a better world. Her light continues to shine and inspires me every day.